For home links 5, we're adding tenths and hundredths. The directions say use what you know about equivalent fractions to add. Write an equation to show your work. So here we're adding tenths and hundredths, but we talked about today how we can change those fractions that are tenths into equivalent fractions that are hundredths so that we can add, because we can only add fractions with like denominators. So number 1, it tells me to put the equation in words. Well, first I need to figure out what this would be. So 2 tenths plus 15 hundredths. But I need to turn that 2 tenths into a new equivalent fraction that also has 100 in the denominator. And that would be 20 100ths. So my equation in words would be 20 hundredths with my THS plus 15 hundredths. Equals, and I know 20 plus 15 is 35, and my hundredth stays the same. Number 2, 68 hundredths plus 3 tenths. I'm going to change that into 68 100ths plus that 3 tenths would be equivalent to 30 100ths. Add the 68 plus the 30, I get 98. My 100 stays the same, 98 hundredths. Number 3, 1/10. I'm going to change that into 10 hundredths plus 50 hundredths, which equals 60 hundredths. Or in this particular case, I could also change this 50 hundredths into 5 tenths. And if I did that, then I would add 1/10 plus 5 tenths equals 6 tenths. Both 6 tenths and 60 hundredths are correct. They are equivalent. All right, next I have 4 tenths plus 60 hundredths plus 3 tenths plus 81 hundredths. So I have to change 2 of these fractions. I'm going to change the 4 tenths to 41 hundredths. Keep the 61 hundredths. The 3 tenths becomes 31 hundredths, and the 81 hundredths will stay the same. So now, 40 plus 60 is 100, plus 30 is 130, plus 81 would be 211. My denominator stays the same, 100. Now, that is improper. I can turn it into a mixed number by saying 100 goes into 200 2 whole times, then there'd be 11 left over to get to 211. Denominator would stay the same, 211 hundredths. Either answer would be correct. Next, I have 1 3 tenths plus 5 and 64 hundredths. So for this, we actually haven't learned how to add and subtract mixed numbers yet, but this one's pretty easy. So I'll keep my whole number 1. The 3 tenths will become 31 hundredths. Plus, keep my whole number 5 and the 64 hundredths. Now, all I'm going to do is add the whole numbers. 5 and 1 make 6. Then add my fractions. 30 plus 64 is 94 hundredths. 6 and 94 100ths. And I'm going to do the same thing for number 6. So 3 and 22 100ths will be added to the 2, and 8 tenths is equivalent to 81 hundredths. 3 plus 2 is 5. 22 plus 80 is 102 100ths. And you could keep it like that, or you might realize that 100 can go into 102 one whole time. And since I have 5 wholes, then I'd be adding 1 whole. There's 2 left over. Denominator stays the same, which is equal to 6 and 2 hundredths. So either of these two answers would be acceptable. 15 tenths is equal to 150 100ths plus 78 100ths. My 100ths will stay the same. 150 plus 78, I add that, I get 8, 12, 1, 2, 228 100ths. 100 can go to 228 two whole times. There's 28 left over, and denominator stays the same. So 2 and 28 100ths. Let me write that a little bit neater. There we go. Nicholas shaded 40 hundredths of his grid. Victor shaded 5 tenths. Who shaded more? I could do this two ways. I could say, well, Nicholas shaded 4 tenths because 40 hundredths is equivalent to 4 tenths. Or I could say that Victor shaded 51 hundredths and then compare. So if I do that, Victor shaded more. How much did they shade in all? Well, if I kept 40 hundredths and 50 hundredths, that would be 90 hundredths. But that is also equivalent to 9 tenths of a grid. 3 equivalent fractions. Remember, whatever I do to the top, I must also do to the bottom. So I could do 2/4, 3/6, or even 51 hundredths. 1/4, if I multiply the top by 2 and the bottom by 2, I'd get 2/8. I could multiply 1 times 3 and 4 times 3 for 3/12. I can multiply 1 by 10 and 4 by 10 for 10/40. 1/3 would be equal to 2/6, or maybe 3/9, or maybe 4/12. 1/5 would be equal to 2 tenths, maybe 10/50, or I could even multiply the top, let's just say, by 8 and the bottom by 8, and I'd get 8/40. Lots of options for your equivalent fractions.